Boys, I forgot to add in two things to my video, so I'm going to go over them very quickly. Let's start off with J.K. Dobbins, 17 of 131 and a touchdown. He looked extremely explosive. Last week, he was the second fastest running back in the league behind Saquon Barkley. This week looked even better. What a pickup for the Chargers to go out and to get him on a cheap one-year deal. Man, it's looking like he might win Comeback Player of the Year. Dobbins again played in just one game last season. The second thing is that Justin Herbert had a design quarterback run for, I don't remember exactly, I think it was 13 yards at the top of my head. But remember, Greg Roman, the new offensive coordinator, worked with Colin Kaepernick and Lamar Jackson, two of some of the most athletic quarterbacks in the game. That was a huge emphasis of their offense. If the Chargers can get that going, now all of a sudden you have an elite running back in J.K. Dobbins. You got Gus Edwards, who's going to wear the defense down, and then Herbert getting those carries. They're going to be extremely dangerous moving forward. Alright boys, welcome back to another video. Thunder Alley here. Today we're going to be discussing the Los Angeles Chargers 26-3 victory in week 2 over the Carolina Panthers. The biggest thing is that, well, the Chargers, they're 2-0 for the first time since 2012. And they have a 64% chance to make the playoffs now because teams that have started 2-0 have made the playoffs that percentage amount of the time. So that's very good news for the Chargers. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to do, but this team has gotten off to a very good start. They beat the Las Vegas Raiders, and I got a lot of comments saying, hey, pump the brakes, take a chill pill. They beat the Raiders. Well, the Raiders just beat the Baltimore Ravens in week 2. As I said, the Raiders have an elite defense, and they're very physical. They can beat anyone. So the Chargers, they deserved more credit for that win. And then in this game against the Panthers, obviously the worst team in the league. You're on the road. The old Chargers, though, probably have a close game, too close to handle, too close for anyone to like, right? That was the old Chargers team, a team that couldn't run the ball. Defensively, usually 30th, 31st in football. But now that is not the thing. You have a team that ran the ball 44 times in this game. Of course, in the second half, they ran the ball all over the Raiders. Justin Herbert only had to throw the ball 20 times in this game. Herbert, I thought overall was good. He did a very impressive job of getting out of the pocket when necessary and making plays, extending them. The protection was great as it was in week 2. That interception that Herbert threw was him just trying to make a play, getting out of the pocket. J.C. Horn was in position and he just jumped up and made a hell of a play. Herbert, he definitely is going to look at the film and learn from that. You just don't see a play like that out of one of the best quarterbacks in the game. 2 touchdowns, both of them went to Quentin Johnston. Only 130 yards for Herbert. It's very unusual to see a Chargers team again running the ball, playing defense, being physical. I mean, especially taking their points. We know the Chargers love to go for it, and they're perfectly fine if it's a 4th and 1, punting it. They'll take their field goal, their points, and just play field position. Of course, the opponent matters. If that's the Kansas City Chiefs, you're probably going for that on 4th and 1 if you're, for example, at midfield. But I just like what this team is doing. I think that the new offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, has the right idea, and that's to just protect Herbert by running the football, play action, letting that open up the rest of the offense. The receivers for the Chargers were what I was looking forward to the most in this game. I knew they were going to run the ball. I knew they were going to dominate defensively. But can the receivers have a better performance in a week 1? And, well, I mean, kind of. Quentin Johnston was very good, 5 for 51 with 2 touchdowns through the air, 6 targets. He also had I guess they're not calling that a rush, they're calling it a reception, so we'll go with that. Will Disley, 3 for 29, he's a tight end, of course, coming over from the Seahawks. Lad McConkey, just 2 for 26, Palmer, 2 for 19. The Chargers just didn't have to throw. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, they didn't have the passing game going. They didn't have to have it. There wasn't a need at all. 44 for 219 on the ground. I mean, the Chargers were just running the ball repeatedly. It didn't matter what the down was, of course. And they did throw the ball on 3rd down and tried to switch it up a little bit. But we will see the offense and what it's capable of fully at Pittsburgh on Sunday. The Chargers, from what I know, are staying on the East Coast, which makes sense. Why would you go back to Los Angeles and then go back to Pittsburgh? That's just way too much traveling. So they're going to stay on the East Coast and take on the Steelers. The Steelers defense last season, elite. This season, even better. It's fully healthy, led by T.J. Watt, who's looking like he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year. He's just all over the place. And then week 4, they are at home against Kansas City. So you have 2 top 5 defenses the next 2 weeks. The Chargers, I promise you, will have to throw more than 20 times, probably more than 24 times even, in those two games, just because they're great defenses and you're not going to just be able to run the ball. But if the Chargers do run the ball on these teams and just continue to pound it, then, I mean, obviously that's going to be a very good sign. But these receivers eventually are going to have to get going. Johnson, his first touchdown catch was 1-on-1 against J.C. Horn, and then his second one just exploited the zone coverage. And yeah, I thought Johnson looked good. And the first play of the game, the Chargers got it into his hands for 3 yards to try to get his confidence going. And yeah, so that was very cool. But I mean, really outside of that, we'll talk about the defense for the Chargers. I'm not going to rant about the Panthers because this is my Chargers channel. I'll do that over on my main channel. Bryce Young, 18 of 26 for 84 yards, 2 sacks. You're probably thinking he was under pressure all game. He had no time to throw. I know a lot of people like to say, well, the Panthers have failed Bryce Young. Guys, Bryce was the most protected quarterback in all of week 1. The only reason why he struggled was because his balls were inaccurate. His timing was off. He was late with it. It was behind the receiver. Bryce, he also had just flat out misses, guys wide open. I mean, Bryce does not look good, and that's why he was benched for Andy Dalton in week 3. And also, I mean, you have to understand Joey Bosa was limited in this game. He still did have a sack. Of course, it's Joey Bosa. But, I mean, it's absolutely wild to me how, I mean, this was a great chance for Bryce. He had protection. Bosa's limited. He wasn't out there for that much and still wasn't able to do anything. The Panthers ran the ball 18 for 90 yards, which is actually pretty solid. It's not amazing, but, I mean, 10 for 64 from your lead back. That's 6.4 yards per carry. Miles Sanders, 7 for 20. I mean, he's one of the worst running backs in football, if I'm being honest with you, which is wild because with the Eagles, he was a Pro Bowler, 1,000-yard guy. But behind that O-line, I mean, I think most of us honestly could be. And then Bryce had a rush for 6 yards. But the thing with Bryce as well is he just doesn't see what's around him. Sometimes he'll evade pressure and he'll run into a guy. Or there was one play where I remember he rolled to his left, and instead of throwing it away, he knew no one was open. He held on to it and took a sack. Just very bad football. I'm not going to say Bryce Young is looking like a bust, but, I mean, man, is he just bad right now. Tommy Tremble leads them in receiving, 3 for 23. Adam Thielen, 2 for 20. Deontay Johnson, 3 for 15. The reason why the Chargers saw so much success in their secondary is because they didn't have to worry about the deep ball. Nobody in their right mind is worried about Bryce Young beating them deep. You could tell Chargers corners were just playing medium, intermediate, and then coming up. That's why in those slant routes, non-existent. That's why on the screens, non-existent. Because Chargers secondary and defensive backs were expecting it. And that's why this game wasn't close. The Panthers, they were in a lot of 3rd and 5+ situations, and they didn't pick it up. I believe they had 1 third down completion. Can I check that on ESPN? I mean, I want to say there was one point where the Panthers were 0 for 9 on 3rd down. I can't check that on this specifically, but 0 for 9 on 3rd down, and they picked it up, went 1 for 10. I mean, how do you expect to win games in the NFL when you can't convert on 3rd down? It's basically going to be impossible. And then your defense gives up 219 rushing yards. You know, Justin Herbert only had to throw 20 times, and the fans were booing. I mean, that's got to be the worst feeling of knowing your own fans are booing you, and you can't even argue it because you know last season you won 2 games. This season you look even worse than you did last year. You traded Christian McCaffrey. You traded DJ Moore, multiple picks, including the #1 overall pick last season that went to the Bears. You know, second-round pick ended up being Tyreek Stevenson, who looks like he's going to be a Pro Bowl corner for years to come. Physical guy out of Miami. I believe the Bears have their second-round pick this year. And then, of course, the Panthers do own their first-round pick, thankfully. But, I mean, we're talking about the worst trade in NFL history. Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Tyreek Stevenson, and the other guys that were in that trade for Bryce Young, who's benched for Andy Dalton. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a Chargers fan, you love the win, but you got to carry that momentum against the Steelers. This is the toughest test for the Chargers. Yeah, the Raiders, I think, are a good team, divisional rival week 1, but the Steelers in their building with that defense and how it's playing, I mean, if the Chargers win that game, I'm going to be feeling absolutely incredible. I'm feeling good right now, but I'm going to be feeling great if they win that game.